When I interviewed at Google, they made me go through 11 rounds of interviews. And I could have been like, forget this. If they can't figure this out after 4 times, I'm done with them. But I persevered, and I told them that, like, I'm excited, I want to do this. And I got in there, and it was worth it. So I think don't get disheartened by little data points. Try to triangulate with a lot more data points, and also realize that there is no perfect company. And like the saying goes, perfection is the enemy of progress. So just go for a better job. You're never going to find a perfect job. It does not exist.
Welcome to 99 Humans. My name is Jeff Lakusta, curious coach and Wall Street Journal best-selling author, striving to understand how little things generate big impact.
And I'm Nadia, Carta, tech executive and lifestyle coach with a mission to transform lives and corporations by kindling hearts to generate a zeal for life.
Each week, we investigate stories about the human side of leadership to re-energize your spirit and help you become a stronger leader.
Because the reality is that leadership is messy, goofy, challenging, but always human.
Thanks for spending time with us today. Let's dive in.
Those are great conversation starters. So I think I'm going to get us going because after recording with Alan on Friday, I did my due diligence and I went to listen to your podcast. And I started listening to, actually probably was your first episode where you basically say the story of how you came up with your brand and your, can we call it boutique agency? I don't know how you call it. So if that's okay with you, I wanted to start there. Tell us a little bit more about you and Kadima. Is this how we pronounce it?
It is pronounced Kadima. You got it.
Woo!
Yeah.
And welcome to 99 Humans.
Thank you very much, Nadia and Jeff. Pleasure to be here, especially with some ex-Googlers or Zooglers as we call. Well, I'm a Zoogler. You guys are both still Googlers. You weren't part of the 12,000, so congratulations for being part of the 180,000 that were still there, or whatever the number is. Yeah. So you want me to share about the derivation of Kadima?
I would love to learn, and then, of course, we're going to get under the skin of some of your messy situations, but I would love to understand.
Yeah, I'll spill all the mess, but before we get messy, Jeff probably knows this a little bit about me. Well, we crossed paths during the time at Google. I've led customer success teams, technical support teams, operation teams, finance, marketing teams. But the common thread between all of my roles across Google and Facebook and Amex and other places was my strong desire to build and grow and develop people. And I always had a passion on the recruiting side specifically. I would always raise my hand when they needed people to go on campus to recruit. I was always tapped by people to interview individuals during my time at Google. In 2015, I interviewed more people than anybody except the physical security team. I interviewed 225 people that year. And I've also helped get a lot of people in to companies. I got 9 referrals into Google, which they paid me $4,000 a pop. I don't know what they pay now, but so that was nice.
I never got anyone in 14 years, so maybe we're gonna do a podcast just to share that secret.
Right. What's the trick?
Well, that's what I teach my clients now. You gotta earn referrals. You don't ask for referrals, and when you get those referrals, if they are earned and they are people that would genuinely support you, they're most often willing to put in like a little nice kind message to the hiring manager on your behalf. And that hiring manager message will likely get you through the morass of all those other resumes that you're competing with so that you can talk to a human. And once you talk to a human, your odds of success significantly increase. But I digress. We'll talk about what got me into Kadima is I really like growing and developing careers. I also have just been a nerd about dorking out about the recruiting space throughout all these years and knowing how imperfect of a process it is, even at great organizations like Google, which has very structured and standardized interviewing, and Amazon. even in those places, you can influence the process. And the people that can most influence it are privileged white dudes like myself. Jeff appears to be one as well. And people that have connections, have inside, not information, but just access to people and understanding of how the process goes, they have a better likelihood of success. So what I try to do with Kadima is level the playing field and help support underrepresented, underestimated, underpaid talent land the best jobs at the best companies. I do help pasty white dudes like myself as well, but I try to market my services and focus my attention on those that need it most.
Wow, that's amazing. And the other day, I know we were talking about your trigger post. I'm going to call it that way, with that magnificent hook. So I guess one of the questions that I wanted to start with is, what have you learned in these years running Kadima, right? Because I also saw one of your posts about a fat paycheck from a tech corporation. So I'm sure a lot of our listeners are, even debating themselves between a corporate and an entrepreneur job. So what did you learn?
Yeah, well, my paychecks were a lot fatter, like you said, when I worked at Salesforce and Google. And I actually have my Salesforce W-2 up there on LinkedIn, so people can check that out. And I don't put that up there to brag, but I do put that up there to share with people that I know a lot of people are looking for entrepreneurship and starting their own business. I think people underestimate the downside, the risk of doing that without having support and knowledge and not having a steady paycheck. And they underestimate the value and the benefit of working for a corporation. That being said, working for a corporation is not all butterflies and rainbows and unicorns or whatever the phrase is. But I used to get a steady paycheck. I used to have 401k that was matched for me. I used to have healthcare benefits. I used to get great swag. Now I have to buy my swag myself instead of getting it. And I do have plenty of swag, my t-shirt and my
good looking swag still.
Oh, I get good swag. This is a Yeti mug. We don't mess around here at Kadima. But there's lots of perks working for a big organization. I've learned a lot. I met great people like Jeff. I'm meeting you now, Nadia, because of that Google connection. And I also have credibility that from those organizations, and I've seen what good looks like. I've also seen what bad looks like at some of the companies I've stopped at, but I know what good looks like. I know how to scale a business. I probably can't scale it to 2 billion users like Google has, but I can scale it to hundreds, if not thousands of people that I can support. So it's been very beneficial to me. I met lots of good friends. I got lots of good logos on my background, on my resume. It expanded my network. It gave me a steady paycheck, and it was lower risk, lower upside reward, but the rewards were quite good as well. And at Google and Facebook, I got great lunches, so that was yummy too.
Alan, I think that we share a similar view of what good looks like, but I would love for you to expand on that point, since our podcast is called 99 Humans, with the undercurrent being that peeling back the facade of what leadership looks like ends up with a human who's dealing with their own emotions and human realities, and they're working in the space of other human beings who bring all of that with them. And that's often messier than what comes out the other end when we write our nice little LinkedIn resumes and everything. So I'd love to hear more about what you found good leadership looks like and what bad leadership looks like.
Yeah. So I actually have a spreadsheet where whose dog
Sorry
is
about
that?
No, that's mine. That's Truman in the back there.
I think
okay.
we're going to ask not to clear this noise. I find the background noise on a podcast so interesting.
I should bring Coco and Tootsie in here. If I knew it was that type of podcast, I would bring my dogs to the party.
Yeah, all dogs welcome.
Yeah.
We might not talk very much, though.
So what good leadership looks like, actually, I think Google did the best job of defining what good leadership and management looks like. And I still think they do the upward feedback survey or the manager feedback survey. Do they still do that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that survey is spot on. I think it asks a series of 10 to 12 questions. I still have my old MFS scores from most of my cycles. And Google has determined that when I was there, it was 8 attributes. I think they've expanded it to 10 attributes that lead to good managers. One is a good coach. Another one is cares personally about me. Another one is cares about my career growth. Something else is like sets vision for the team, can help me from a functional skill set. There's like 10 items. And they also determine that the number one factor for a well-run team is psychological safety. And there are key factors that you can measure that determine psychological safety. And when I've been part of psychologically safe teams where I felt comfortable raising concerns, asking questions, if I made a mistake, learning from it rather than being punished for it, that was where I was most successful. My teams were most successful, and we produced the best results. So that's on the positive side. On the negative side, there have been so many different examples. And this is what I was saying before. What was your dog's name? Hoover?
Truman.
Truman. Sorry. Wrong president.
No. It's the bar that my husband and I met at. It was named Truman.
Nice. So before Truman interrupted, I actually have a spreadsheet that tracks my 21 different companies I've worked with, the 29 different jobs I've held, and the 35 different bosses I've reported into. And I give each of them a 5-point score from like 1 to 5 stars. And my average job rating is 4.2 stars. My average boss rating is 3.1. And I have 9 1-star reviews there. Actually, one time I posted this on LinkedIn, and I actually had an indicator for which ones were. Can I curse on this podcast?
Or Go for it, yeah.
Okay. I had an indicator of which ones were assholes, and I determined that 9 were assholes. This is subjective rating based on my response.
You know it when you see it.
And 9 is my lucky number. We spoke about it on Friday, so.
Yeah. 9 was not so lucky. But 9 out of the 35 were a-holes. And after I posted that on LinkedIn, I got a cease and desist letter from one of my former companies saying that I should take that down. So I no longer have that up, but I can share it with people over DM. I'm not going to post that on LinkedIn to 875 million people.
Wow.
But some of those attributes that those poorer leaders exhibited was micromanagement, was telling you how to do things, not what to do and the why to do it, was lack of trust, was not empowering people, like micromanaging and not empowering. That's another thing that the Google Manager Feedback Survey asks. Does your manager empower you versus micromanage you? And I've seen some of the worst managers be micromanagers. I've seen some of the worst managers also give lack of vision of what's going on, of also lack of transparency. So there may be things coming down from above, but you have no idea why these are coming and what the rationale is. And also the fear of failure. So when you make a mistake, rather than give you that feedback and help you learn and grow, to tell you 6 months later during your performance review, oh, you know what? Your communication could have been a little tighter. When you spoke at this meeting in front of senior leadership, you were a little too casual with them. Well, you know what? It would have been helpful if you told me right after, and I could have adjusted that, and then I could have learned that that's how you wanted me to talk. So that's a little primer on the difference between the quality management and the subpar management.
Is there, Alan, because you've had, director level positions at many of the biggest company names that everybody will recognize, a story that comes to mind either on the 1s or the 5s where it really makes it come to life? Because I think part of working at a big company and being a human leader is that you've still got a manager. And actually that gets put behind the curtain a lot, right? Like we all have managers in big companies, unless you're the CEO of that big company. And that sometimes creates the best environments and sometimes creates the worst environments. So I'm curious just to understand more about what that element for you as a leader meant and what maybe knockoff effects that was creating for then the people that you managed and your team as well.
Yeah. So one of probably the more influential managers and leaders I've had in my career, I think you probably know him, Jeff, Ben Sates. Um, he was
Oh
Oh
always
yeah.
yeah,
very, yeah,
I
and
know Ben.
Nadia, you
Yeah,
do.
yeah.
So he's managed me a couple of times. He was actually the person who referred me into Google, which after 5 applications, when my resume got went into the Netherlands, he put in a good word on my behalf after just meeting me, after just talking to me, and I was his only referral that actually got into Google. But anyway, one thing that he always did, which was really helpful, is he was extremely transparent with me.
Mm.
I knew what, like, he shared a lot of information with me that he probably, I don't know, he uh, may not have done with other people, or maybe he has, but it gave me a lot of good insight and perspective of what was going on. So I took a lot of that transparency and trust and continue to utilize that throughout my career. Another thing he did, which I really appreciated, is he walked the floor, got to know people. When he came to the New York office, he would always like meet with a lot of people, and he got to know individuals. So that was something. Also, I think I've always done, maybe to a fault. I've managed down better than I've managed up. Um, and it gets me a lot of loyalty with my employees, but it doesn't always get me as promoted as quickly as some of my peers have. But I think the transparency, getting to know people on a human level, and yeah, I think that transparency. I'm a very transparent person by nature, but I think just seeing that has stepped it up further because I really don't see, outside of some very sensitive issues, as like only some minor exceptions. I'm pretty much an open book, and I will share all information with people. And sometimes it gets me in trouble, sometimes it gets me fired, but I don't know. I think overall it's done okay for me.
The one question that I have, Alan, is that it seems you've done a greater degree of analysis about what good looks like, what great looks like, and all of that. And I wonder, as you were managing your team, if you ever had a situation with someone reporting to you that you were so under pressure and so challenged that you were at odds in saying, okay, how can I show up as a good leader here? What would I do?
Um, so I don't know if this is exactly. Could you like clarify that so I make sure I answer it properly? What you're looking for here?
Well, so for example, being completely honest, right? So, using our vulnerability here, sometimes we as manager we would know what is the right thing to do as leader to get the 5 stars, right? But not often that is the same as matching what would be the good thing to do for the person. So we might have to
Got it.
take some tough choices as well.
Yeah,
So have you found yourself in any of those tough choices?
yeah. I have. I just recently heard from someone. Yeah, yes, I have. So sometimes I've either inherited people on my team, or usually when I've inherited people and they've been doing something for years or for the previous leader, and they're like, "This is my job. This is what I'm doing." And I come into the team, and I don't usually make the change right away. I usually try to take at least 90 days to listen and understand what's going on. But when I understand what's going on, and the people on the team, not all, but a couple of people on the team are not doing what is really required of the role, I will be very direct. I'm a big fan of Kim Scott and her radical candor, where you care personally and you challenge directly. I probably, I think I know I need to work on coming across as caring personally more. I do care personally. It doesn't always come across. Maybe it's my New York direct style. I come across as very direct. I have no problem with that, the challenging directly, but I do have a problem with people perceiving that I care personally. So I do have some situations where people were in a role that they're doing something some way. So maybe they're just doing tickets, like a troubleshooting. And I'm like, well, this role really requires you need to be able to do the core troubleshooting, but what you need to do is resolve the issues at scale as well, and you need to figure out what's going on. And maybe this person just likes resolving cases. And I was like, that's fine. I don't need that on my team. There are other roles on other teams that can use that. And that is off-putting to the individual because they're comfortable on this team that I joined and that they've been on for years. And all of a sudden I'm saying, well, based on my assessment of the team and based on what our stakeholders need, we don't just need to be resolving cases, but we need to be solving things at scale globally in a globally consistent manner. And I think there sometimes I've hit up against people where they have been doing things that they've wanted to do or that they've been okay doing. And I've often been brought into situations because things were broken, where things needed to be improved. And I'm okay with that. I'm very cool with, I probably because I'm so comfortable with change, I project on others that everybody's comfortable with change. I know that's not the case. After multiple mistakes of going through this, I know that's not the case. So I think having people change as quickly as I need them to do, and it's not even that quick, but just like that friction of, hey, you need to change. Give me a date of when you want to change. And they won't even change. So that causes some challenges where it's either like, and I'm probably not as direct of saying, hey, it's my way or the highway, but that's essentially what it is, because there's a reason why we're changing. I try to give that context, but still you're moving somebody's cheese, you're changing their world. And I probably don't I know I am not as sensitive to those changes that people have to go through because I've changed so much in my life that I'm so comfortable. I assume everybody is, but I know that's not the case.
You bring up Radical Candor, which I thought it was a universally loved book, but I think that book also is somewhat controversial in terms of its paradigm, but I really like it as well, and that's one that I think about and try and live up to. And I usually have a challenge with the directness. I'm a very caring person, but the direct part is something I have to be more intentional about. In fact, I changed somebody's job. I had to. A reorg happened. Their job was changing. I had a 30-minute conversation and said, you have this great new opportunity, all this. And at the end, they go, great, I'm going to think about it and let you know. And I'm like, ooh, no, your job has changed tomorrow, and that's the job that you're doing. Sorry about that. But I'm curious because it is something that basically, for those who may not know it, the paradigm asks for radical care about the person and radical honesty about the situation, that directness. And on the care piece, when you're thinking about how do I be more intentional there, what comes to mind? What tips do you have for how do folks be intentionally caring if maybe that doesn't come naturally to them?
Yeah, I think you need to understand a little bit more about the individual as a person. You have to understand, I think it helps to understand their family life, although sometimes people don't want to talk about that, and that's okay. But I think it's important to understand what drives or motivates the individual. And I sometimes I don't think I ask enough about that, and I assume that I know what's driving that person's motives. But I have tried this, and I just have done a poor job. But when I do take on a new team, I do have a list of about 30 questions that I go through. Very consistent questions. I got it from the book, The First 90 Days. I didn't get all the, I probably added a few questions of my own to that as well. So I try to get in there and understand. And I think also, I think ask a lot of questions and listen and try to remember some details as well. And I know, Jeff, you and Nadia, if you manage people, you manage lots of people. It's hard to remember all those details. It's hard enough for me to remember my details about like what I need to do in my life, let alone all the who has 2 daughters and 1 son versus 2 sons and 1 daughter. And when you get that stuff wrong, it kind of erodes trust. So I got your dog's name wrong. That was an honest mistake. I just heard your dog for the first time here, but things like that could say, oh, this guy doesn't even listen to me. So I haven't figured that out on the personal side. I think about 80% of people that I work with they think that I do care personally. And like I have had difficult conversations with people and had to get them off the team and find another role for them. And I've still been good friends with them after. And then there's some where they've been pushed off the team and they still hold a grudge against me like 15 years later. And I don't even remember the situation. Like this just came up on LinkedIn. I just reached out to this woman at Google. I won't say her name. And I was like, holy cow, I can't even believe I'm not connected with her. And so I sent her a note to connect, and I was like, hey, I was surprised we weren't connected. Hope all is well. And she came back to me saying that she left with a very bitter taste in her mouth with our relationship. And it was almost the exact situation that she wanted to do all these strategic projects, and I needed her to do transactional cases because we were overwhelmed with that. And she apparently she went to HR, she told me, and like tried to complain about me. That was one time I didn't get in trouble with HR. But so I didn't even realize that I had that impression on her and that impact on her. So I don't know where I'm going there, except I have not figured out how to effectively communicate that I care personally. I think I do it about 80% of the time. But
I think you said it, and it sounds like it's listening. And what you're sharing, and I find this to be true, is it's a skill, and it's hard to constantly be practicing that with intention and get it right in the right ways that pick up on the body language and the words and the meaning behind all of those things combined. And I think that's something that Nadia and I are both passionate about as coaches, and is refining that skill. But Alan, it really does resonate on it's a challenging thing. And to the 80% of the time that you're getting it right, it's making a huge difference. And to the 20% of the time that we get it wrong, it makes a huge difference just the same.
Well, I guess
totally.
I'm gonna throw one of my bombs. This is bomb time on the podcast because I'm listening to both of you doing this interchange about radical candor and vulnerability and directness and transparency. So, and I mean, my leadership style, Jeff knows me very well. I'm always, some people would call it a slap with a kiss, but we could say that I'm fairly a leader that everyone wants to work with because I would always give you the things, but in a very, very nice way. So, what I'm wondering here as we're having this conversation, and as a lot of our listeners are leaders in corporations, and we have to deal with OKRs, we have to deal with performance reviews, we have to deal with priorities. Like, we cannot have the cake and eat it all the time. I'm wondering are we chasing a holy grail of kindness, compassion, and directness because these things are mutually exclusive and so they cannot exist? Or is there a leader that exists that cares deeply about humans, loves them, remember the name of their dogs, remembers all of the birthdays, and is also radically direct?
I think there definitely are. Um, I think most people, so despite me pissing off a handful of people, I still won like one of the Google Great Manager Awards. So I was generally seen as a good leader. And I think from the people that I resonated with, I was seen as someone who cared personally and challenged directly. I don't know if anyone is going to get 100% support of everyone. Like I was just listening to a podcast about Bobby Knight, who's a basketball coach from the Indiana Hoosiers basketball team. He was known for throwing chairs, and like I think he got fired because he actually put his hand on a player. But he also connected with so many people, and he has created so many amazing proteges that became coaches in their career, and he has a lot of followership. So I've never put my hand on somebody like he did, and I haven't thrown chairs, although I felt like it sometimes with my kids. Not at them, but just in frustration. But I don't know if anyone has pleased everybody. I'm sure there are. I'm sure there are some leaders that are just amazing all the time. Um, I, yeah, I'm sure there are. And I think what they probably do a better job on is I don't think the directness is a bad thing. I think generally people like direct and transparent feedback, but I think maybe the care and the empathy, whether you actually exhibit it or at least are conveying it so that the person perceives it. And communication is not what you say; it's what people hear or it's how they feel. So um, I don't have the exact answer to you. I don't know who's like the best leader of all time or anything like that. Maybe John Wooden from the UCLA Bruins, or like even the best bosses I've had, they were not perfect at every stage. So there's no perfection, and I think as long as the boss or the leader is open to that feedback, and I love the fact about MFS, Manager Feedback Survey, where you actually get feedback and you can actually look at that feedback. I wish that managers were actually held accountable for that, and I always found that to be inconsistently utilized by leaders. So if I'm getting manager feedback score and it says that I'm not creating a psychologically safe environment, but I'm delivering my business results, and my boss doesn't care as long as I'm delivering my business results, therefore that like I don't even know why they bother to survey the team on how psychologically safe do you feel. And I've seen that happen a number of times. I've been at Google, Salesforce, Facebook, where they do look at psychological safety, and you will see teams that have high psychological safety and teams that have low. And the low ones continue to have low time after time, and nothing is done about it. So I think it comes down to accountability. I think it comes down to like receiving that feedback, listening to that feedback, and then being accountable for doing something about that feedback.
You're bringing up something that makes me think about the leader's autonomy and ability to create, the results and the relationships and the care that they want and the system that they're operating within. And these two things can fuel and amplify that or combat and make that more challenging. And I would imagine in your space of helping people connect with, bigger and better jobs that they're looking for and get the most out of it, I'm curious, how do you talk to people about exploring and interviewing the company, which is almost like a cliche that in the interview, yes, of course, they're interviewing you, but you're also interviewing them. And what tips do you have for folks in actually finding out more about that system that they would be going into, and what kind of culture should they be on the lookout for, which then influences the autonomy they have?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's a personalized decision. So some people like very direct, very cultures like that. Like, I think I would actually do well in Amazon's culture, but there are people that would not. And that's totally cool. So I think it comes down to a little bit personalized in terms of values that are important to you. And what I think people make a lot of mistakes here because they take anecdotal feedback. So they might have gone to an interview and the interviewer showed up 8 minutes late, which is rude, which is wrong, but there could be a lot of different reasons for that. And then they write the company off. They're like, oh, they care nothing about me. They don't respect me. Instead, what I tell people to do is look, and Google does this, and like a lot of the companies I've worked for does this, look more analytical, look more with data. And if you see that the Glassdoor reviews are very positive and you happen to have a bad experience here, I would trust the numbers. And Glassdoor is not perfect, but it's a pretty good proxy for how companies are and how their cultures are. If you get a decent sample size at a company in terms of the survey results. So I would look at that. And I think people eliminate themselves from a job and from the interview process because they're disrespected, or because they feel disrespected, or because they heard one friend say, oh, we got to work here on the weekends, even though it might have been like a big campaign. It happened once a year. So, and then they write it off of like, hey, this is going to be a terrible work-life balance. So I would look more, as I make decisions in general, look more at a large sample of data and be careful not to over-index on anecdotal data points. And it's super important to know there are no dream jobs. There are no dream companies. There are no perfect companies. I've worked at 21 companies. Google is the best company of those 21 companies I've worked for. Google was not perfect. Most recently, how they did these layoffs. It's okay that they laid off 12,000 people. The severance was really generous in a lot of ways. The way that they communicated it was shit and was poorly done, and they could have done a better job about that. So, and there are other issues with Google. I'm not going to go trash talking Google, but I do generally think Google is a fantastic company. But when I interviewed at Google, they made me go through 11 rounds of interviews. And I could have been like, forget this. If they can't figure this out after 4 times, I'm done with them. But I persevered, and I told them that, like, I'm excited, I want to do this. And I got in there, and it was worth it. So I think don't get disheartened by little data points. Try to triangulate with a lot more data points, and also realize that there is no perfect company. And like the saying goes, perfection is the enemy of progress. So just go for a better job. You're never going to find a perfect job. It does not exist.
So, Alan, a bit of a tough questions, and we could continue approaching the end. We're almost there. I know right now you're not in a corporation, if that's correct.
That is correct. Well, my own company, but we're an
Your
LLC.
own company, yes.
Yeah.
So if you, let's say that come September, you want to join a corporation again, which would be your top 3 corporations that you would desire to go back to?
Google, for the people like you guys, and the food and the pay. Google's median compensation, I don't know if people realize this. Google has 180,000 employees, and the 90,000 mark, like the median, gets paid $296,000. What other company has, like, it's the highest median compensation? Plus, I think they're very good at challenging themselves and being fairly open, although I've heard that closed down a little bit after some leaks. So Google will be number 1. I do think Stripe is doing some really good things, and they've attracted a lot of good talent. Although I have seen in Glassdoor, referring to Glassdoor, and I posted this recently on LinkedIn, you see a precipitous decline in Stripe's feedback from employees over the last year, not just after the layoffs. So I don't know exactly what's going on there. And then if I have to pick a third, there's a lot of good ones out there. It really depends on someone's mindset and depends on them. I think Amazon could be that if you're someone who wants to really learn great operations, great process, great innovation. But if you don't like that type of work environment where you are blatantly treated like a widget, that might not be the best option for you. Salesforce is good. Adobe is a great company. Spotify is, I've heard, great culture. Microsoft, I think I would put third. That's what I would put third. I'd put Google, Microsoft, and what was the third one I said? Stripe. But Stripe, like a little bit more research to be done. But Microsoft, I would put second. I think Satya, at least from what I've heard of him and read about him, he seems like a top-notch leader.
We gotta track Stripe then. We'll see if your predictive skills will be accurate.
Yeah.
Alan, I know maybe as a final parting piece of advice, there's kind of an elephant in the job search world, which is layoffs.
Yeah.
Which you've been quite active in posting about, and throwing research out there and a perspective out there. I'm curious what piece of advice you would give to someone who has been laid off and is looking to find the next thing, given the economy. How does that advice shift, and what would you tell them?
Yeah. So first off, if you were laid off, there has been very little consistency, transparency, or logic behind a lot of these layoffs. So it is not the lowest performers that got laid off. In some groups, yes. Others, no. It's all like very different based on the leader. You could be part of a bad business unit. You could be part of a team where the senior leaders have no idea who you are, so you got cut. Could be a lot of reasons. So first off, don't take it personally. Secondly, for people that have never been laid off before, I've been fired or laid off or displaced or canned or given the pink slip 5 times in my career. It happens. We are employed at will. When you sign your offer letter, it says, and in case of Google, it says in all cap letters, you are employed at will. This means that you can be fired. I don't think it says fired. It might say you can be terminated for any reason at any time. But it also means that you can leave for any reason at any time. So make sure that you are taking advantage of your free agency and you are owning your career. And do not wait for layoffs to come to you. Like I've been talking to some people and they're like, oh, I missed this one. I'm lucky. And I was like, well, what are you going to do about it? It's like, I think I'm safe now. It's like bullshit. You're not safe. You are never safe as long as you are being employed by somebody else. There are ways to make yourself safer. There are ways to make yourself more immune to getting laid off. But I've seen really strong performers, really high impact people get laid off. And there's lots of talent out there. So like the first part of the question, don't take it personally. The second part is, the economy is tough, but there's lots of jobs out there. There's lots of companies hiring. There's lots of new industries. There's lots of actually smart companies now that are jumping on this wave of talent that is now suddenly hitting the market. And they're not going to suck up thousands of jobs. So Google used to have 9,500 jobs available. Now they have 900 jobs available. So those big tech companies are not going to gobble up that talent, but there's lots of good companies out there, either large Fortune 500 companies, mid-sized companies, startups that people can apply their wares to. And another thing, because the job market is so tough, if you have been thinking about going back for an MBA or some further learning, it might be a good chance to consider that. Although if you do make that investment in your time and money, make sure you're investing in universities that will give you a good ROI on it, because there's lots of crap out there that are selling you 3 letters and getting you no other results besides those 3 letters and a lot of student debt.
It seems we need to do a follow-up podcast only about these things. I'm getting just now super tangled into this conversation.
Alan, where can people find you if they want to hear more, if they want to connect?
Sure. So first off, I have the Sick Career Podcast. It's SYCK. And I like acronyms, so it's Steer Your Career with Kadima, SYCKpodcast.com. I've had great guests on like Nadia. I'm going to have Jeff on at some point. Yay. I've had Russ Laraway, if you know Russ at all from your Google days. He was on the podcast. I've had some good guests on. Also have quite diverse guests on as well. I make sure that I really get different people's perspectives from a non-white dude's perspective. And you can also follow me on LinkedIn. So I post daily, sometimes multiple times a day. And if you like what I say there, thumbs up it, leave a comment. If you don't like what you say, tell me why. I have changed my opinions on lots of things, like Jeff Bezos says, or like he encourages people to be. I have very strong opinions, but they're very loosely held.
I love it. Well, thank you so much. We'll put those links in the show notes. It's great to see you again, Alan, after all this time.
Great to see you too, Jeff. And great to see you, Nadia. And if either of you want to invite me up for some Google lunch, I'm always willing to come. I think I've been about like a dozen times since I've left Google.
There we go. Bring it on. Yeah. I'm in Atlanta, so come visit.
Oh, you're in Atlanta now?
Yeah.
I did not know that. Okay. I like Gus's fried chicken down there.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, that's tough to compete with then.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you so much for having me on the pod.
Thanks,
Thank
Alan.
you for coming.
Bye.
Bye. Have a lovely day.
Bye.
All right. So great to see somebody that I haven't connected with in a long time. Alan has had an illustrious career at a number of different companies, and senior positions over the last several years, and seen him certainly becoming quite active. I will say in the influencer space, but sharing his opinions on LinkedIn and trying to help people navigate the many companies that he's worked on.
Hmm.
Really interesting to hear his perspective on hiring and firings in this
Mm.
time,
Oh,
especially.
yeah. Were you in the same department? Like
We
closely?
were both in an organization called GTech, which is quite a large organization. So we didn't ever work directly together, but kind of
Mm.
in orbit of each other for a few years there.
Got it. Got it. Okay, so Jeff, our reflections on the podcast, like
Yeah,
always. What is your biggest moment, let's say?
I think what dawned on me again, and it's related to this time that we're living in, and it's empowering, and it is an important reminder to be empowered right now when it comes to the potential of being laid off.
Mm.
And so I think he alluded to this idea that companies provide the culture, they don't provide the safety.
Mm.
And that is an important reminder. That making sure I'm prioritizing the culture that I want to be within, and then remembering not to be lulled to sleep by amazing perks and amazing care. Like, even if that culture is amazing, it still is very much a relationship in which safety is not something that I should put into the company bucket. That needs to be
Mm.
in my own skill set bucket. What am I doing
Mm.
within the company to create my own safety, and or what am
Mm.
I doing to make myself highly uh, you know uh, marketable if I were to be laid off, before I get laid off, to always be interviewing. That's something I'm very passionate about and really open about with my team, and encourage everyone from a career coaching perspective. And all this is constantly be interviewing. You need to know your worth out in the market, get a vibe on different cultures, understand what's happening out there. It takes a little bit of extra work, but when the dream job comes along, if you haven't interviewed and that skill set is really rusty, it's too easy to go and bomb the dream job interview only because you haven't interviewed in a couple of years maybe. So
Ah.
that was a good reminder for me.
I mean, now that you're saying it, it's a good reminder for me because, yeah, I don't do a good job there. So, I mean, even interviewing, I only did one interview last year and then I didn't get the role. And even my resume, I'm always like, I could look better. So, yeah, I hear you. And it's just tough. But yes, I agree. Rationally speaking, I definitely agree.
It's tough because we're busy, right? It feels like a time thing for me. That's what makes it so tough is
But also because you would want to show up well and you would want to prepare. I mean, look, preparation takes a lot of time. I remember last year when I was interviewing for this job, I was preparing so intensely to show up well. But recently, one of my peers, she said, what would happen if you were to interview without doubling down so much and just showing up? I don't know.
mm, so there's a balance there, because obviously prep feels good and feels right, but also it's unrealistic maybe for all constant interviewing, if that's the style that you're going to absorb, to do it the same level of detail.
I guess I always want to believe in my witchcraft that the opportunities would come to me and I'm a magnet for opportunities and I don't chase, I rather attract.
Mm,
I,
yeah.
you know how I am, right? Like I live my life more towards these principles.
But you're doing things like a podcast that are helping it attract. It's not like you're sitting on your butt hoping that things come to you.
Well, hell no. And I'm also doing my rituals for everyone that is wondering. I did a money bag yesterday.
Yeah, I
I
love it.
can
All right,
share
Nadia,
you.
what are you taking away?
Okay, so huh. Look, I think I got a little, the thing of the directness and empathy I've seen in my career I was a very direct leader, and then I started swinging towards the more caring and empathetic. And I think that now I found, the right balance. So I want to believe that if any of my direct reportees are listening this, please let me know. But what I'm saying is, I want to believe that directness and transparency are not at odds with love,
Yeah.
caring, and kindness and compassion. I still want to believe that you can be direct and not be a jerk. You know what I mean? So for me, that whole conversation with Alan that we had around that and what good looks like, and that continues to be the holy grail. Like I really want to continue to do work on that regard in transforming lives and corporations, because I believe that life is too short. We spend so much time at work. It's not worth it otherwise.
100%. Well, the book that was discussed was Radical Candor, and that book would say you're absolutely right. They are not at odds. It is possible. It's just rare. I think that's what makes good leadership kind of a rare thing that we're all working towards is it's hard. It takes intentionality, all that, but it's not impossible. They're not mutually exclusive. So we continue the quest because I'm certainly right there with you, trying to be the best leader that I can be, which has got to be both of those things.
Well, what would happen if suddenly we would treat leadership as a job with art skills required, competencies required, rather than an additional trait that someone really, really good at their job has? Because I think that that's a part of the problem. We consider leadership, oh, they have great leadership, but maybe they are very good at operations. What would happen if leadership is a job in itself that you
Yeah.
need to practice for, studies for, and get ready for?
Ugh, I love this because something that I find happens quite often is we take the best performer on a team and go, great, you're the leader now. Now you've got all these reports. Like, okay, great. What does that mean? No training, no support. You were good at the job, so you must be a good leader then. And it's, if we broke down leadership maybe into more criteria, more pieces, we'd be able to talk about it in a more sophisticated way and help all of us. I found out I was a terrible listener, and that was on top of other great qualities that helped me mask my leadership for many, many years. I wish that I had been given that feedback and opportunity to grow earlier.
So, more to come as we continue unpack leaders and leadership and vulnerabilities on 99 Humans. So, great to see you, Jeff, and great
Good
to.
to see you. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Ciao.